Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching New Week right here on TV 47 with me, Leah Ngari. As I promised, we'll be having a panel discussion tonight. And I will begin by introducing the youth leader. I'm so proud to have you here, by the way. Ongam Lobi. And she's here to speak to us about different issues that pertain to young people. We also have Karriera Muthiora, who is a former presidential running mate. Happy to have you here, by the way.
It's
and also Ruth Mbogo, the beautiful Ruth Mbogo, always gracing our studios. And I'm happy. She's a youth policy and governance expert, and I'm glad to have you guys. Tonight, we have a couple of discussions. We won't be too long, but let's just try and just delve into the issues. Let's begin with the Echesa story.
Yes.
And I'll begin with you, Ruth. Your thoughts on the DP being linked to this particular story.
Well, first of all, before I begin, I'd like to say congratulations to unveiling this very interesting platform for the young people. It is a step in the right direction to have the youth talk about national issues. And straight on to the discussion, I think we are not new to cartels and groups of people forming and impersonating leaders and going out there conning very serious business people lots of money in the name of we are working for the government or we will give you tenders. If you remember, last year around the same time, around February 27th, there was a group of 7 cartels that had been arrested for impersonating the president, and in fact, they actually had amongst themselves one person who sounded like the president. So they would go for meetings, arrange for meetings with very senior people, very senior members of, rather owners of big companies. And the company in question was Samia Africa. They would go with chase cars. They even had cars that had government number plates and pose as officials from State House and squandered, managed to get money from these people in very huge sums, to millions. So by the time they had already taken the millions, now the Samia Group of Africa leaders wrote to State House wanting to thank the president for awarding them a contract, rather awarding them a huge tender, only to realize that, they had been conned. So it's very unfortunate that we live in a day and age where sometimes politicians fall to certain traps. I am not sure as to whether the DP is a victim, or a victim or a participant in this. However, just to ask the question, it comes to mind the question that if you're innocent, you would not go to quite a long length to try and defend yourself when you're not under trial. Nobody has arrested the deputy president, or neither have government or police knocked at his door, but he was very quick to defend himself. So that was one thing that made me think twice.
All right, Karriera, what do you have to say about that?
Ruth has been a little diplomatic. What she's avoiding to say is Kenya is one huge criminal enterprise. That's what we are, because she just described how the office of the president, State House per se, was used to swindle an innocent citizen or company. And now we have this story. Allegedly. I think we should be bold enough to say, if you're going to take me to court for saying it as it is, then I'm ready. So there are things I won't have to say allegedly, because if it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, then it most probably is a duck. And I would like to congratulate TV 47 for taking the bold move and launching something new. What we need as a nation is a break from status quo, to do things differently, to call ourselves what we are, and that is the criminal enterprise, and then re-engineer this nation.
Wow.
So you ask me if we should talk about the deputy president. We talk about him and crime every other day. So the best way for us is, let's just look forward where we won't have our leaders being linked to crimes. You remember the gold scandal?
Yes.
You remember the Right Honorable's name being dragged into that, Wetangula and all that, and then we had Uhuru Kenyatta's bit of story, and now all fingers are directed at DP Ruto. Yes, allegedly, he may be a devil, but then he's not the only devil in that basket. So those pointing fingers need to first deal with the rot amongst themselves.
Let me hear from Lobi here. You look at the leaders that we have. You're a young leader, youth leader. and you look at what we are seeing with our leaders currently, what would you say, as a young leader who's looking up to them and saying, what can I learn from them?
It's unfortunate that we are having this kind of leadership in our country currently. And I'd say, as a young leader who's aspiring to be one time a national, in the national front, just fronting the issues of the common mwananchi, I'd say, looking at the current leadership, there's no one I'd say that I really look up to. And that's why I think we need... you'd find that they have... there are very few. What I'm trying to say, there are very few people that you'd look up to and say, I would really want to be this person because we are having more of the bad crop of leaders rather than the good crop. And every time we see the media amplifying the negative voices that we are seeing. For example, right now we are having this scandal of the firearms. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we are having the coronavirus menace in China. And we saw the ambassador speaking and saying, I need help. Right now, what we really need is divine intervention. So you really look at our priorities as a country, what we are really talking about in the media, and really it doesn't really meet the mark, to be honest. So I feel like we need to prioritize our things really well. And when you look at this scandal, for example, yes, I like the fact that we are talking about the DP being at the center of it. But my question is, how many times, and Ruth mentioned, we had a scandal whereby young people swindled Samia Group 10 million shillings, and they were mimicking the voice of the President of the Republic of Kenya, and State House was involved. Why didn't we see people questioning and saying the President should step aside? Why is it that we are being a little bit one-sided? And I'm not defending DP Ruto, I'm not affiliated to Tanga by any means, but why is it that we are very selective when it comes to pointing out the real issues that are affecting the Kenyan?
So you feel there's some sort of disparity in highlighting these issues?
Yes.
Well, let me just take it back now, away from that. Echesa, of course, has said that perhaps he believes that there's a political plan, perhaps it's like a witch hunt. Mm-hmm. I want to hear from you, Karriera, what you would have to say about that.
There's no witch hunt here, and it's actually disappointing that we are talking about Echesa. The only reason we're talking about Echesa is because of corruption. Echesa was picked from being a hooligan, put into public office to serve when we know he didn't even merit to be in that office. So it's regrettable that we are talking about Echesa. So anything he says, yes, he has the right, but then we should take it with a pinch of salt. There is a crime that was committed. The courts will determine that. But dragging politics into a matter that, in my opinion, is black and white.
But he believes perhaps because he's somewhat having a relationship with the DP, perhaps he's being serialized, so to speak, because of his affiliation with the Deputy President. Do you think this is the case?
No, it's not. It's true. There's information out there that investors, together with Echesa, held a meeting in the Deputy President's office for 23 minutes. Now, we know the President said those, as in when he fired him, he was relieved of any responsibility to represent Kenyans through the government. So let's not belabor the point. He was found at a place he shouldn't have been, doing something he shouldn't have been doing. Let the courts determine this case without the public thinking that there's politics being played here. When an ordinary citizen is caught stealing a chicken, nobody cries wolf. Yeah, they are taken to court, charged, and like you saw the guy who had the python in a bag, the case was expedited, and in less than a week he was jailed. I think that's what the courts should do with this matter. And let's not drag politics into this.
The building, okay. Ruth,
before we run away from the Echesa discussion, I think one thing that citizens and Kenyans need to be very wary of is the common phrases that, oh, my people are being attacked, our people are being attacked. This is political witch hunt. The same has been said of governors who have been alleged to be involved in corruption cases. And it is usually a populist statement. It is a statement to whip your emotions, to have people stand by your side. And, I genuinely think that if anybody is innocent. The first statement one should be saying is, first of all, I believe I am innocent, and I invite the authorities to come and investigate me. Remember when Sonko, the allegations of corruption began floating, within our media houses? What did Sonko say? He said that, if indeed the ESCC comes to knock on my door, I will present myself for investigation. Of course, he resisted, but at some point his words came to bite him in the back. And the other thing that I think the deputy president needs to do is that he needs to put his foot down and state what his stand on corruption is. Because a lot of times in the past, he's been seen hanging around and being very close to people whose names have been floated at the ESCC and by the authorities for being involved in corruption or in scandals in one way or another. So he presents himself as a soft spot for anybody being involved in corruption to run to him, start appearing as if they're aligning to him, and then the moment the authorities knock on their door, the discussion becomes, my people are being targeted. I'm being targeted for being affiliated with the deputy president. In fact, the other thing that I would have expected as a Kenyan before we move to the next discussion is that when the moment this case came up and the deputy president had his office being mentioned in the story, the first thing he should have done is he should have said, first and foremost, if I'm not involved, I am not involved in this. If he is not involved, that one, I am not involved in this. Second, I am allowing the authorities to do their work, let them do their investigation. And third, as a person whose office is coming under disrepute and whose name is also being dragged down the mud, I open up investigations in my own office to find out who was responsible for allowing these people to get into my office to run the operations from my office, and whoever is responsible be fired. You get, so he needs to really put his stand down and say where he stands. Yes,
and tell us exactly where he stands. I want us to move to the Building Bridges initiative, and I'll begin with our youth leader here. Do you feel that this document has included the youth adequately in the conversation?
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that BBI is a very well thought out document. And I like the fact that Ruth is here. She was among the youths who are actually really involved in the process and just submitting their thoughts and recommendations to the task force. And so I'd say, from my point of view, I've seen the young people being engaged. I wouldn't say it's every young person in Kenya who's been involved in the process, because we've had representation from the particular groups of people, and youth have been among the people who've been represented. However, I don't feel like it has been able to address each and every issue that affects the youth.
What are some of the issues you think that the BBI has not addressed?
I'd say they have just mentioned the problems that are facing the youth, but they're not giving us a clear roadmap on how we're going to go about these issues. One of the key areas that I've seen that it has come out so clearly that the youths are gaining is the 7-year tax holiday. Yes, that's the only thing. These other things are indirect. Of course, when you talk about 35% allocation to the county governments, definitely the youth are going to benefit from that. And also when you talk about the public servants not engaging with business with the government,
yes,
then definitely youths are going to benefit from that. But I want to see a clear roadmap. How is it that youth are going to benefit from the BBI? Yes.
Let me hear from you, Ruth, before we go to Carriera.
Yes.
You being part of the task force, as Mulobi here has mentioned, I just want to understand. Some people feel that the BBI report was not necessary because some of the proposals have already been highlighted in the Constitution. And what was missing is definitely the implementation. What are your thoughts and feelings about this particular
Well, I would want to agree with them in part and also disagree with them to some extent. We must understand where the Building Bridges Initiative proposal came from. It came from a handshake, which came at a time where Kenyans felt that they were divided along tribal lines, and our biggest discussion was lack of inclusivity. Now, for me, when it comes to the proposals, there are a good number of them that, in my view, could be resolved by mere changes within the law that can be proposed before Parliament. However, there are some fundamental changes that the Building Bridges Initiative document seems to be proposing. And one of them being that we are now introducing the position of the Prime Minister within Parliament, which, if one looks at it, one might want to think that, oh, this is a new position, we are going to have a higher tax burden, we're going to spend.
Will there be more burden for
There will
Kenyans?
not be any more burden. And in fact, I have always been a proponent for that. if there be need to invest in proper leadership, then let us go all out and invest in a proper leadership and a proper structure that shall deliver best for the country. Because remember, when we are talking about the position of Prime Minister being included within the BBI report, we are discussing having an extra, and it's not an extra seat, because remember, this is a member of parliament. And in fact, the report proposes and says that whoever shall become the Prime Minister shall not earn any extra salary as over and above what they will be earning as a member of parliament. It is basically just having a position whereby we can be able to have proper coordination between parliament and the executive, and other arms of government. But if you ask me again onto the propositions, I agree with Cesarine that some of the propositions, the youth have been bundled into the economic aspect of things. They've been bundled in that lens of let us look at how we can help them grow their businesses, how we can help them access funding, how we can help them get mentorship for their businesses. However, the bigger conversation becomes that if we do not discuss youth inclusivity when it comes to, for example, political inclusion, you're still creating further exclusion. That maybe for now women are saying, for example, you'd find at the moment the discussion we are having is tribal exclusivity, where certain tribes feel like they've not been included. And in the report, tribal exclusivity is what has been discussed at length. However, we are forgetting there's this age exclusivity, in the sense that you have a huge percentage of young people who form the vote basket, who majority of the population is the youth, but we are not discussing inclusivity of the youth in key aspects. So what we are saying, the report is not, what we are saying is that the report is not perfect. There are great,
but it has some good things and some things
there
have
are
been
wonderful
left out.
things in it, and this is why the second process is very important, that the youth can come together and say, over and above what the initial draft has proposed to us, we think, for example, in my view, I think we need to have a youth commission, a properly constituted youth commission, youth-led, youth-centric, driving and trying to steering for the youth agenda, and monitoring how youth is included in entire government activities.
All right. Karriere, I want to hear from you about the BPI report, your own general thoughts about the report.
The handshake is the best thing that has happened to this nation in a long time, because in a single event, all the hostilities that Kenya was experiencing ceased. Now, the BBI process, when it was conceived, in my opinion, and I have said this in several forums, it was a bribe that was given to the Right Honorable Raila Odinga. And look at it clearly. They had ample opportunity to get everything right, but they started by excluding the youth to begin with amongst other groups. They had a chance to correct that when it came to gathering views on the views they had collected in the first phase. They did not correct the mistake. So this bribe that was given to these elite people, I'm not in favor of, because as a nation, we've had a constitution for the last almost 10 years, but then the implementation has not been 100%. It has not been impartial. There are things that could easily have been done, but they have not been implemented because they are not the interests of those in power. Now, even if all the recommendations in the report are perfect, we know, given the leadership we have today,
implementation will be a problem?
Implementation will be a problem. So Kenya's problem is not that we do not have the right framework in policy, legal or otherwise. It's the leadership. That's where the problem is.
Ruth,
yes,
you are part of the task force, is what Mulubi here has mentioned. But I just want to ask this question, which I know very many people are asking out there. How do the young people stand to benefit from the BBI report?
Well, I always say that the narrative that is being pushed by the youth, that the process was not inclusive by us, was not inclusive of us, so we should not be a part of it, is a very dangerous narrative, in the sense that, well, the train might have taken off, but there is still a chance to onboard the train. So for me, the interest that the youth should be focused on is what already has been promised in the report, and holding onto it, talking about it, discussing how best the same can be delivered.
But how do they stand to benefit? I think that's the question
how they
that
stand
many
to,
are asking.
Well, And I guess the question is, what is in it for the young people?
What is in it for them?
What is in it for the young people is that we have a whole section, as Cesarine had mentioned, about taxation. We have a discussion. There was a whole section where the report was proposing for the establishment of a foundation, a charitable foundation by private sector members, and the foundation is supposed to offer mentorship to young business owners and supposed to help them access funds. Young business owners. There's an entire section on the government investing in ensuring that every young person accesses basic education level to the secondary school level of education. There are talks about ensuring that political parties include the young people on their party lists. There are discussions about, in short, there is a number of provisions, but my opinion still stands that this second chance is a proper opportunity for us to discuss that which is not in the report for us as the youth.
Now, just allow me to rebut something she has said. If I'm to accept her invitation and appear before the task force, one recommendation I would present them, which I'm sure they would not carry, so I won't even attempt, is that the leadership we have today, if you have served in this regime or the previous regimes, as we've seen how spectacularly they have let Kenyans down, is that all those who have served should not be allowed to hold office or run for office. Because you'll tell me, since you've been around, our problems have been caused by this crop of elite leaders we have today. So they cannot be the same people to provide solutions. So that's why my appeal to everyone who's following the BBI process keenly is sit back and reflect on a different thing that does not include the people we have today. That's the only way we can move this nation forward. And this is the conversation that Kenyans are having, although in hushed tones. We are tired of being taken in circles. Our problems are caused by these people who are pretending to now want to provide a solution. It won't be a solution.
And yet they can maybe be the problem. Let's just hear from you, Ndobi.
I think it's important for the youth of this country to actually be part of this process and to give their views. Thing is, most youth distance themselves from issues of national importance and such conversations that really matter. And you'll agree with me that most youth actually do not know that there's a provision, 30% when it comes to the procurement process, 30% should go to the women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Most youth do not know this. And so when the challenge becomes when you're ignorant of the things that are happening, then you're not even able to claim your space. Yeah. You're not able to claim and say, I know this is what is supposed to happen to this crop of people, and therefore it is not happening. Therefore, I'm demanding this as a right. It is my right. So when we exclude ourselves,
do you think the young people are like that? They don't look interested in knowing issues about the issues that are affecting them directly or even indirectly sometimes.
I think it's just because of
motivation or something like that.
There's lack of motivation because, as we've said, these things are on paper. There are so many things that are regarding youth policy, employment.
So how do you think you can engage the young people so that they start taking part in this conversation?
But we are here as young people, and we are in circles, and we influence other people in our circles. So that is how we will get to reach each and every youth to come on board on this conversation.
All right. Yes. Now, one thing, the steering committee on the implementation of the BBI shall hold an institutional stakeholders consultation forum tomorrow. And the purpose is to validate the report of the Building Bridges Initiative Task Force. You are part of that task force, so you must. You are part of it in the beginning.
Yes.
But what do you think is likely to come out from this particular meeting tomorrow?
Well, I think first and foremost we need to understand that the validation process is the process where people come and say, when we came before the task force, we presented 1, 2, 3, 4, and indeed we agree that 1, 2 were in the report, 3 and 4 were not there, so we are still affirming that we want 3 and 4 in the report, or proposing. And actually the validation process is also to propose the best policy recommendations and best ways to implement some of those provisions of the task force. So even if we were to go for a referendum, we will not be voting on everything that was in the content of the Building Bridges Initiative report. We'll only vote on that which needs to be changed by way of a referendum, which is mostly sometimes structure of government, rights, and basically it would be the aspect of the structure of government. So what we should be expecting to come out of that particular forum is
tomorrow.
Exactly, tomorrow is to see whether they will affirm that indeed what they had presented before the task force in the first phase is what was included in the report, and also get to hear of what are these recommendations that this whatever entities will be presenting before the task force will be giving as a way of the best ways to implement the propositions. And finally, I was not in the task force. I represented. Just to clarify, I represented the youth. We had a group of young people who we went around, collected views from various youth leaders across the country, and presented the same before the task force. And I'm happy to report that actually a great percentage of what we had proposed during that reporting stage was captured in the original report.
Fantastic.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. Ruth Mbogo, always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And of course, Mudhira Carriera. Carriera Mudhira, you like it the other way.
Mudhira
But hey,
Carriera, yes.
some of us like it the other way. But thank you so much for coming, for gracing our studios. And of course, our youth leader here, Mulobi, such an inspirational girl. And I really, really am happy to have you here as a young lady who can represent the young people. Thank you guys for coming. Let's hope that we'll have you again.